The hip-hop community is stunned. In a spectacular FBI sting operation, Jim Jones, the legendary figure from Harlem, was just arrested. And why? An unexpectedly leaked film that reveals his covert dealings and could potentially put an end to his career. As snippets of this spectacular footage go viral, social media is currently going completely insane. What was Jim Jones hiding, fans wonder. The tape was released by whom? And how quickly did the FBI become involved? This is a serious controversy that might put Jim in jail for a very long time. It's not just a simple arrest. According to people familiar with the matter, this was a meticulously prepared takedown, an undercover operation that had been underway for months. The true question, though, is, was Jim Jones set up? Or was he actually engaging in illicit activities behind closed doors? Celebrities are already responding to the industry's concern. While some are removing themselves from the controversy, others are standing up for Jim. And believe me, the details only become more bizarre. This is just the beginning of the story, so fasten your seatbelt. Let's examine Jim Jones's specific problems and how the FBI apprehended him. Jim Jones has always led a precarious life, juggling his fame in the music business with a reputation that has kept him in and out of the spotlight. He was more than just another rapper. He was a hustler, a businessman, and someone who understood how to get along with influential people. However, it appeared that he had approached danger too closely this time. This was not a social media stunt, a rap feud, or industry rumors. It was the FBI, the shattering news that one of the most iconic characters in hip-hop, Jim Jones, had been taken into custody in a high-profile FBI sting operation, went viral. It was not a routine arrest. There were severe charges. Financial crimes, conspiracy, and illegal dealings could put him in federal prison for a very long period. The fans were stunned. How did this occur? What transpired in the background? More significantly, what would happen to the Dipset icon next? Rumors had been going around the industry for months that Jim was involved in something significant and confidential. His loved ones began to notice changes. He met with unidentified associates, was more circumspect, and made cryptic, nonsensical gestures. Then a video appeared one day. Leakage was not intended. The shaky video, which was shot in the dark backstage of a posh club in New York, revealed Jim Jones having in-depth conversations with individuals who had previously been on the FBI's watch list. These were men with ties to significant underground activities. They weren't rappers or business executives. Even though the talk was muted, several words stuck out: coded exchanges, money transfers, and a deal that needed to be handled quietly. Fans initially didn't believe it. Was this thing real? Jim Jones had established a reputation as a streetwise businessman who understood the game but lacked the recklessness to be involved in anything this risky. The worst was soon confirmed by law enforcement sources. This was no typical video. It served as proof in a current FBI probe. Jim was also an important player, not merely a spectator. As it happens, Jim had been under federal surveillance for a while. He was unaware that his closest colleagues had been turned into informants, that his meetings were being watched, and that his phone had been tapped. Every transaction, every shady business, was being videotaped. What had he gotten himself into? Leaked allegations claimed that the FBI had been following a vast underground operation that involved money laundering, illicit commercial dealings, and relationships with people already the subject of federal investigations. Jim Jones had stepped directly into the fire, whether he realized it or not. The release of the leaked video was the last nail in the coffin for federal officials who had been waiting for the right opportunity to eliminate him. It was time to move in. They had sufficient evidence. For Jim, it was just another night. Power movements, exclusivity, and luxury. He had just finished a private party at one of the best VIP lounges in the city. The plan was for it to be a night of celebration, networking, and business. However, the FBI was waiting outside that location. Witnesses reported seeing black SUVs parked outside the club for hours. The highly skilled federal operatives inside were not your average police officers. They were prepared to attack Jim as soon as he left. Then it took place. Jim came outdoors and the street was filled with sirens and flashing lights. The entryway was ringed by armed operatives who blocked all escape routes. Jim was shackled, restrained, and shoved against a car before he could even react. His security detail made an ineffective attempt to intervene. The sting was federal. There was no escape. The spectators and fans were stunned. Social media immediately exploded with video of Jim's arrest. Phones were out and cameras were flashing. The clips went viral in a matter of minutes. One of the most well-known figures in hip-hop, Jim Jones, was being carried away by the FBI while in handcuffs. The internet failed. Fans were furious, perplexed, and in dire need of clarification. Is this an actual thing? What's going on? There's no way Jim became involved in any illicit activities. They set him up, bro. I don't think so. However, the headlines were unambiguous. Jim Jones was being held by the federal government on suspicion of engaging in unlawful commercial activities. An eyewitness said they heard Jim's final remarks as the mayhem broke out, just before he was thrown into the FBI car. Dude, this is insane. Are you guys going to do this correctly? Neither do I talk nor do I do nothing. But it was already too late. Jim Jones was quickly whisked away by federal officials as the car doors slammed shut. The industry titan, the Harlem icon, the Dipset legend, all were now in federal detention. What's the worst? This was only the start. With his hands still firmly bound behind his back, Jim Jones sat in the rear of the black SUV. As the truth of the situation began to set in, the icy steel pressed into his wrists. This was no small miscommunication. A few phone calls to the appropriate individuals weren't going to resolve this. The feds were involved, and they moved with a purpose. As the SUV drove away from the location of his arrest, the streets of New York became indistinct. He was attempting to figure together how this had happened, and his mind was racing. Never leaving a trace, never speaking too much, and never putting his trust in the wrong people, he had always been cautious. But he had made a mistake somewhere, somehow. The entire globe was now observing. He was aware that his phone had already been taken away from him. Social media was ablaze. His name was popular, hypotheses were rife, and hashtags were pouring in. Blogs were analyzing every bit of film, fans were frantically searching for explanations, and his team was presumably in full crisis mode, attempting to control the damage. However, the reality remained that this might be beyond our control. Several agents were already waiting at the heavily guarded federal facility where the SUV drew up. Jim's pricey designer jacket was now a little creased from the rigorous treatment when the door opened and he was yanked out. As he was escorted inside, cameras flashed, but he maintained a neutral expression with no emotion or response. Fear was a sign of weakness, and he had learned that long ago. He went through a number of processing stages inside: documentation, photos, and fingerprints. As they managed the legalities of bringing in a well-known suspect, the agents spoke in clipped tones and moved swiftly and efficiently. He was then escorted into a room for questioning. The sterile, frigid environment was made to shatter even the toughest men. There were 2 chairs on either side of a single metal table in the center. Jim's face was deeply shadowed by the stark lighting and the empty walls. He was left alone for a long period. No attorney. Nothing but quiet. Jim reclined in his chair, his thoughts still racing. He hadn't decided what to do next. This was not how he was going to die. The door then opened. With immaculate suits and unreadable looks, 2 agents entered. One of them, an elderly man with keen eyes, sat down opposite Jim and set a heavy file on the table. With their arms folded, the other stood close to the door, observing. The agent said, "James Jones," and opened the file. Jim remained silent when asked, "You know why you're here?" Without legal counsel present, he knew better than to speak. As though he had anticipated that, the agent grinned. A picture he slid over the table. The image was a still from the leaked tape, the grainy footage of Jim in that dark back room, deep in conversation with guys the FBI now referred to as high-value criminal targets. Jim's mouth clenched. The agent went on, "We have you on tape. We've been keeping an eye on you for months, so this isn't just one meeting. Jim, you've been caught in every conversation, message, and transaction. The only thing left to ask is, how bad do you want this to get?" Jim maintained a composed demeanor as he leaned forward a little. He stated calmly, "You don't know what you're talking about." The agent shook his head and laughed. He pulled out another document and handed it over the table in response. "See, that's where you're wrong," he said. Jim's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "This is a witness statement. Someone close to you, someone in your own circle, gave us everything. Someone had lost it. He had been sold out by someone." The agent went on, "Look, Jim," his voice becoming almost empathetic. "You're an intelligent man. You understand how this works. You believe your team can get you out of this. The allegations we have against you might result in substantial federal time. Rethink your decision. The data is undeniable. Right now, cooperating with us is your best bet." Jim breathed slowly as his thoughts raced. He needed to reflect. He needed to discover who had betrayed him. It was necessary to ascertain the true extent of the federal knowledge. However, it was evident that this was no longer solely about him. They must have stuff on other people if they had this much on him. His group, his business associates, his inner ring. Additionally, it indicated that they were pursuing larger targets if the feds wanted him to speak. Jim Jones, too. He had no intention of becoming their bait. The door abruptly opened once more, and Jim's attorney entered. He was a well-dressed man with years of experience in handling high-profile cases. Even though his expression was stiff, it was still nice to see him. The lawyer put a heavy folder on the table and remarked firmly, "We're done here. My client is not responding to inquiries." The agent grinned, seemingly anticipating this. He merely answered, "For now," getting to his feet and shutting the file. "But Jim, consider what we discussed." The agents then departed, leaving Jim and his attorney alone. You don't want to be the last one standing when the house of cards falls. The lawyer turned to him as soon as the door closed, his voice urgent and low. Jim nodded, his face blank. "This is bad, Jim. Really bad. I need to know everything," the attorney went on. "Every single detail, including who you spoke with, what agreements were made, and how serious this is, because failing to act now might result in years in prison." Jim let out a sharp sigh. "I don't know who snitched," he said. "However, someone did." The attorney's expression hardened. "Then we find out who," he said, "and we determine how to combat this." Jim nodded, but he knew the truth in his heart. Fighting charges wasn't the only thing at stake here. It was a matter of survival. Because treachery was more than simply a legal issue in the society Jim Jones lived in. The penalty was death. Jim's mind was working overtime as he sat still in the questioning room. He could still hear the lawyer say, "Jim, this is bad. Very terrible." He was aware of it. He sensed it. He had previously defeated minor accusations, but this was different. It was federal. It was a big one, and someone near him had lost it. The chilly cuffs around his wrists were not as painful as the treachery. Who was responsible? Who had arranged for him? He had always had a close-knit crew. However, even the most devoted man could become unstable because to money, fear, or greed. His lawyer was shaking his head as he flipped through the papers. More to himself than to Jim, he whispered, "They've been watching you for months. This is an unbeatable case, Jim. They have surveillance, audio recordings, and witness testimony. They want to do more than just take advantage of you. Their intention is to bury you." Jim's jaw tightened. Unless they had a more ambitious plan, the feds didn't come down this way. Had they picked up anyone else? There was an underlying strain in Jim's calm voice as he eventually inquired. The attorney let out a sigh. "I'm attempting to ascertain that. They haven't given names yet. However, the fact that they're pressuring you to comply, they want someone larger than." Jim let out a long sigh. He wasn't the only one involved. This has to do with his connections. The attorney leaned forward. "You currently have two options. The first is to remain silent, get legal counsel, and fight this battle the hard way. 2, have a conversation, make a compromise, and protect yourself before things worsen." Jim's eyes were hard on him. He firmly stated, "I don't snitch." The attorney regarded him thoughtfully for a long moment and then nodded. "After that, we get ready for war," he stated. Jim was about to reply when someone knocked on the door and a guard answered. "Time is up," declared the guard. After gathering his documents and straightening his suit, the lawyer gave Jim a final glance. He said, "I'll be in touch. Remain silent. Don't speak to anybody." Jim nodded, and then he found himself by himself once more. They led him to a cramped, desolate holding cell. The weight of the dozens of men who had sat there, wondering how their lives had devolved, was heavy in the air. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall. Then suddenly there was mayhem. The uproar spread throughout the jailhouse. Inmates shouting, doors banging, guards fleeing. Jim heard footsteps hurrying towards his cell, and his eyes sprung wide. A security waved him forward as the door opened. "You have guests," the guard remarked. Jim scowled. His attorney had already arrived and left. Would anyone else be present? They took him to a different room with a glass barrier after leading him down a lengthy hallway. Chrissy sat on the opposite side, her arms folded. Jim felt a knot in his stomach. Even though he had experienced street fights, shootouts, and near-death situations, nothing unnerved him more than confronting an irate Chrissy. Her eyes met his with a ferocity that chilled him as she picked up the phone on her side of the glass. After hesitating, Jim answered the phone. What on earth is happening? Before he could even speak, Chrissy made a demand. Jim let out a sigh. It's difficult, Chrissy sneered. Difficult. They think you've been caught up in some serious unlawful activity. Jim, when I wake up, my phone is blowing up, social media is going crazy, and news reports are all over the place. And I have to come down here and see you through the glass now. Jim gave his temple a rub. He didn't have any nice responses or anything to calm her down. At last he said, I didn't do what they're saying. Chrissy's eyes narrowed. Then Jim explained the video. Since I witnessed it, it was seen by all. You're sitting in some shady meeting with individuals I don't even know, discussing handling business and moving weight. What on earth did you think? Jim's jaw tightened. He was aware that the video looked awful, very terrible. Even to his own ears, the words sounded faint as he said, It's not what it looks like. Chrissy gave a head shake. Jim, are you even aware of how terrible this is? You were brought here on federal accusations. Those that are kind don't simply leave. Jim said nothing. He was aware of her correctness. Chrissy lowered her voice and leaned in. I must know if this is truly it. Will everything come crashing down at this point? Jim felt the impact of what she had spoken as he stared at her. In actuality, he was unaware. A guard intervened before he could respond. The time is up. Chrissy shook her head and let out a deep exhale. She got up and said, At this moment, I'm not even sure what to say to you. Jim put the handset closer to his ear. Please, just hold it down for me. Chrissy stared at him intently. She remarked, Jim, I've been keeping it down for years. Perhaps it's time for you to learn how to follow suit. She hung up and left after saying that. Long after the line had died, Jim continued to sit there and hold onto the phone. For the first time in a long time, he was uncertain about his ability to reconstruct his world while it was falling apart. Jim sat in his holding cell, processing all that had transpired in his mind. His ears rang with Chrissy's remarks, but he didn't have time to think about them. What was ahead was the true issue. The weight of the federal government's strong case was bearing down on him. He was going to recline when he heard footsteps approaching, and he sat up. A guard gestured him forward as the cell door opened. Come on, Jones, let's go back to questioning. Jim's expression remained unreadable despite his racing heart. He was aware that this wasn't your typical interrogation. The real pressure was going to be applied. The lead federal agent was already at the table, leafing through a big folder of documents when he entered the chilly, antiseptic interrogation room once more. Jim was pushed onto the chair across from him, and his eyes hardly moved. Mr. At last, the agent stated, Jones, in a cool but forceful tone. We have a lot to talk about. Despite his burning anxieties, Jim maintained a calm posture by leaning back. He stated calmly, I don't know what y'all are talking about, as I already told you. With a laugh, the agent moved a file across the table. Jim didn't touch it, but he did look down at it. You ought to have a look, the agent added, because that's exactly what it is. It's your entire existence, every phone conversation, every meeting, every commercial transaction, whether legal or not. Jim, we've been observing you for a while. Jim tightened his jaw but said nothing. The agent bent closer. You can now continue to act harsh. You can continue to act as though you can defeat this charge. However, let me be quite clear. Jim, you are here. You're on our tape. We've got witnesses. We have witnesses who were present with you and are prepared to testify. Furthermore, those individuals are not as devoted as you may believe. Jim's gut churned, but he kept it to himself. Sensing the strain, the agent grinned. That's correct. Your folks are ride or die, do you think? Don't you think they'll flip? Allow me to explain the current situation. They're out there negotiating while you're sitting here in handcuffs, stealing deals, sacrificing you in order to protect themselves. Jim let out a slow exhale. Dude, do you honestly think I'll believe that? The agent gave a shrug. Have any beliefs you like. However, don't be shocked if the judge sentences you to 25 years in prison. There was silence in the room. Jim knew the feds weren't playing a bluff, but he also knew he couldn't be weak. Unless they had a strong case, they never showed up. The agent took a seat back. Jim, here's the thing. You walk, you talk. We can figure anything out if you give us something greater. Jim gazed at him with an unreadable look. At last, he declared, "I don't snitch." The agent let out a sigh. "Then, I hope orange jumpsuits appeal to you. For a very long period, that is all you will be wearing." Another officer entered as the door opened. "Time is up," he declared. After being dragged to his feet, Jim was led back to his cell. However, something felt different this time. The air felt heavier and the walls narrower. The situation was becoming more and more real for the first time. This was not going to be easy for him to escape. His mind was racing as he sat on the chilly metal bench. Who had flipped? Who had provided what the feds required? More importantly, was there any chance of escape? Hours went by, days perhaps. Time seemed to be deceiving him, stretching and twisting. Suddenly, there was a bustle. Shouting, footsteps running. Jim immediately sat up, his senses sharpened. Something was happening. A guard jangled his keys and ran to his cell. "Get up, Jones," he yelled. Jim scowled but followed instructions. Before he could inquire what was going on, the door sprang open and he was hurried along the corridor. "Where are we heading?" Jim insisted. No response. Just a few quick steps. When they arrived at the facility's rear exit, Jim was completely taken aback to see a black SUV waiting outside. He spotted his lawyer, his new lawyer, whom he had never met before, when the back door opened. With urgency, the man said, "Get in." Jim paused only a moment before intervening. The SUV suddenly drove off as the door slammed shut. "What on earth is happening?" Jim inquired. The attorney let out a breath. "Jim, you have high-ranking friends. To get you out, someone just pulled some very powerful strings." Jim's thoughts were racing. "Who? How? But pay attention to me," the attorney went on. "This is not the end of it. You must keep quiet. The feds aren't done with you, even if they let you go for the time being. This is not at all finished." Jim's hands clenched. He was uncertain as to whether he had just entered a more significant game or been saved. There is a lot of conjecture, speculations, and unending questions on the internet as the dramatic arrest of Jim Jones comes to a conclusion. The shocking disclosures, his covert transactions captured on tape, the FBI sting, and the ensuing intense questioning have left fans in shock. However, one thing is certain: the story is far from over. It's only the beginning, if anything. Will Jim defend himself against these accusations? Or is this the point at which he is permanently defeated? The most important issue of all is who betrayed him. Since the federal government doesn't move until they have inside information, let's face it, Jim must have lost it, and the industry will be rocked to its foundation when the truth is revealed. Let us know what you think. Is Jim Jones going to get a heavy prison sentence, or do you believe he will win this case? Was he indeed caught slipping, or may this have been a setup? We are aware that this is going to be one of the most important discussions in hip-hop, so please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications if you want to receive all the updates as this story develops. If history has taught us anything, it is that nothing in the hip-hop industry is ever as it seems. So trust us when we say you won't want to miss what comes next.